The crystal champagne flute didn't just slip, it was pushed. Serafina felt the icy splash of 300 a bottle Dom Perignon soak her cheap polyester waitress apron, a sneering laugh following it. "Clean it up." Kendra hissed her diamond bracelet, a gift from Serafina's own husband, flashing under the chandelier. "And get me another." This one was flat. Kendra thought she was humiliating a destitute ex-wife forced into menial labor. She didn't know she was mocking the woman who, in 10 minutes, would be announced as the co-owner of the entire restaurant chain. The next words from the CEO's mouth weren't for his mistress. They were for his wife. The ache in Serafina's feet was a dull, constant throb, a painful reminder of her new reality. For the past 28 days, she had not been Serafina Price Thorne, wife of Valor Hospitality Group's CEO, Marcus Thorne. She had been Sarah, the new, vaguely incompetent waitress at the Gilded Spire, her husband's flagship restaurant. The polyester uniform, a drab shade of grey, chaffed at her neck. She'd spent the last decade in bespoke silk and cashmere, and the cheap fabric felt like a betrayal. Her hair, usually coiffed in a sleek blonde bob, was pulled back in a severe, unflattering bun, tucked beneath a hairnet that made her scalp itch. "Sarah, table 4 needs water, and the host just sat a 6-top in your section. Pick up the pace." That was Robert, the restaurant manager. He was a decent man, perpetually stressed his tie, always slightly askew. His eyes shadowed with fatigue. He'd hired Sarah out of pity, she suspected. She'd shown up with a thin, fabricated resume, citing food service experience, in a small town that had supposedly been devastated by a flood, washing away all records. She'd been clumsy, dropping a tray of water glasses her second day, and constantly mixing up the table numbers. In truth, she wasn't clumsy. She was distracted. As she refilled water glasses, her eyes weren't on the crystal. They were on the point-of-sale POS system. It was an archaic model, slow and prone to crashing. But its biggest flaw wasn't its speed, it was its security, or lack thereof. Every night she watched, as Robert reconciled the day's earnings, sighing at the discrepancies. Voids, comps, and spills were skyrocketing. Her job here wasn't about earning a paycheck. It was an infiltration. Serafina Price was not just a society wife. She was the daughter of Arthur Price, the brilliant, unassuming man who had built the Valor Hospitality Group from a single beloved diner in Austin into a nationwide empire. Arthur had been the genius, the heart. He had made Marcus Thorne his protégé, impressed by the younger man's ambition and slick charm. Too impressed. When Arthur passed away 5 years ago, his will was complex. He left 50% of the company to Marcus and 50% to Serafina, but her shares were held in a silent trust. Marcus was given full operational control as CEO. The trust, however, had a clause, one Marcus had long forgotten or dismissed. It would dissolve, giving Serafina full, active, and equal voting power on their 10th wedding anniversary. That anniversary had been 1 week ago. Marcus had celebrated it by giving her a polite, distant kiss on the cheek and a pair of pearl earrings, respectable, bland, and passionless. He'd then claimed an emergency board dinner and left. She knew he'd spent the night with his mistress, Kendra Stone. For the past year, Serafina had watched the company her father built begin to hemorrhage cash. Profits were down, debt was up, and Marcus's explanations were a tangle of corporate speak, market fluctuations, leveraged assets, aggressive rebranding. Serafina, who had quietly earned her own MBA from Wharton online while playing the part of the perfect hostess, knew he was lying. He was either incompetent or he was stealing. She'd decided to find out which. What better place to see the rot than from the ground floor? Sarah, stop daydreaming. Maria, another waitress, nudged her. Maria was in her early 20s, working 2 jobs to pay for night school. Table 2, the blonde with the facelift, is glaring at you. She said her soup is cold. Right. Sorry, Maria. Serafina hurried over, offering her most apologetic smile. This is tepid, the woman snapped, pushing the bowl of lobster bisque away. Are you new? You seem lost. I'm very sorry, ma'am. I'll have the kitchen remake it immediately. As she turned, she saw them. Marcus Thorne, her husband, striding into his restaurant like he owned the place, which he thought he did. He was wearing a custom navy Brioni suit, his Patek Philippe watch gleaming. On his arm, clinging to him, with a possessor's entitlement, was Kendra Stone. Kendra was everything Serafina was not. Loud, flashy, surgically enhanced and dripping in labels, she wore a skin-tight red dress that seemed more appropriate for a nightclub, and she carried a white crocodile Birkin bag, one Serafina knew for a fact cost more than Maria's entire year of tuition. Serafina's blood went cold. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a painful, frantic bird in a cage. This wasn't supposed to happen. Marcus never came to the flagship for lunch on a Tuesday, and he never brought Kendra here. This was his place of business, and even he wasn't that arrogant. Until apparently today. Robert rushed forward, his face a mask of practiced welcome. Mr. Thorne, what a pleasant surprise. We weren't expecting you. A last-minute decision, Robert, Marcus said, his voice booming with false geniality. He didn't look at Robert, he was scanning the room. I have some special guests arriving. We'll need the best table, the one by the window. Of course, sir. Right this way. Kendra preened, scanning the other diners, enjoying the whispers that followed her. Then her eyes landed on the waitress in the drab grey uniform, frozen by the kitchen door, holding a bowl of cold soup. Kendra's perfectly painted lips curled into a slow, malicious smile. She stopped walking. Marcus, darling. She cooed loud enough to turn her heads. Look, it's the help. Marcus followed her gaze. His face, usually so tan and confident, went stark white. He stared at his wife in her hairnet and stained apron, and for a second he looked terrified. Kendra, however, looked delighted. She sauntered over her hips, swaying, leaving a trail of cloyingly sweet perfume. Well, 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 she purred, stopping directly in front of Serafina. She looked her up and down, her expression one of exaggerated pity. My goodness. Serafina, look at you. How the mighty have... Well, you know. The dining room of the Gilded Spire, usually a refined space, filled with the quiet murmur of business deals and polite society, fell into a tense, expectant hush. The clinking of silverware slowed. Diners at nearby tables paused forks halfway to their mouths, sensing the brewing storm. Serafina's hand, the one holding the soup bowl, began to tremble. Her Sarah name tag felt like it was burning a hole in her uniform. I'm sorry, ma'am, Serafina stammered, dropping her gaze, clinging to her cover. I'll take you to your table. Kendra let out a short, barking laugh. Oh, ma'am, how professional. Marcus, isn't she just a picture of professionalism? Marcus had recovered his composure, but his eyes were hard and cold. He walked over, standing beside his mistress, creating a united front. He looked at Serafina, not as his wife, but as an inconvenience, a problem to be managed. Serafina, he said, his voice low and threatening. What is this? What game are you playing? Game! Kendra scoffed, running a hand down the lapel of Marcus's suit. Darling, this isn't a game. This is what happens when you get replaced. I told you she wouldn't take the divorce settlement well. I just didn't think she'd end up here. It's almost too perfect. She turned back to Serafina, her voice dripping with venom. Tell me, darling, Does this job even cover the rent on whatever sad little apartment you've had to move into? Because I know for a fact Marcus has frozen your accounts, all those lovely Amex cards, snippety snip. She mimed cutting scissors with her fingers. A few diners gasped. Marcus did nothing to stop her. Robert the manager looked back and forth between them, his face pale with confusion. Mr. Thorne, I don't understand. This is Sarah, this is your wife. His ex-wife, Kendra corrected loudly. Or soon to be. He's upgrading, aren't you, baby? Marcus looked deeply uncomfortable, not with Kendra's cruelty, but with the public nature of it. Kendra, let's just sit down. Robert, get us some champagne. Oh, no, Kendra said, holding up a hand. I want her to serve us. She smiled a predator's smile. It's only fitting. Won't you serve us, Serafina? For old time's sake, I'll be sure to leave you a very generous tip. Maybe you can use it to get your hair done. Those roots are tragic. Serafina's knuckles were white on the soup bowl. She could feel the stares of her co-workers, of Maria, of the bus boys, of the kitchen staff, peering through the porthole window. She was their boss, their owner, and she was being dressed down like a child. The shame was scalding, but it was quickly being replaced by a cold, clarifying rage. Right this way, sir, she said, her voice, flat, her eyes, fixed on a point just past Marcus's shoulder. She led them to the prime window table. As she set down the menus, Kendra deliberately knocked hers to the floor. Oops, pick that up, will you? Serafina bent down the polyester uniform, pulling tight across her back. She retrieved the menu and placed it back on the table, her hands perfectly steady. Can I get you something to drink? She asked the Sarah persona, now a shield. I want the Dom Perignon, the 2012 vintage, and make sure it's properly chilled. Kendra ordered. And for an appetizer, we'll have the... Oh, wait. You probably know the menu by heart, don't you? What's the cheapest thing on here? I'm sure that's all you can afford to eat these days. The staff meal. Kendra, Marcus warned. What, I'm just making conversation. It must be so humbling for you, Sarah, to go from hosting senators at your dinner parties to serving me, a woman who actually knows how to keep a man like Marcus satisfied. This last comment was a whisper, but it was aimed directly at Serafina's heart. Serafina said nothing. She just nodded her face, an impassive mask, and walked toward the bar to retrieve the champagne. Pathetic, she heard Kendra hiss to Marcus. You were married to that for 10 years. No wonder the company's a mess. She has no spine. When Serafina returned with the champagne bottle and 2 flutes, her hands were steady. She presented the bottle to Marcus, who waved it away impatiently. Just open it. She expertly uncorked the bottle with a quiet thwump. She poured a small amount for Marcus to taste. He swirled it, sniffed, and nodded. She then moved to pour for Kendra. And that's when it happened. As Serafina tilted the bottle, Kendra lifted her hand, the one with the massive glittering diamond bracelet. She didn't just bump Serafina's hand, she pushed it. The bottleneck jerked, and the pale gold champagne splashed over the rim of the glass, dousing Kendra's hand and the pristine white tablecloth. Kendra shrieked, jumping back. You clumsy cow, look what you did. This is a $20,000 bracelet. You probably got your filthy waitress germs all over it. She stood up, grabbed her napkin, and began frantically dabbing at the diamonds. Then, with a look of pure spite, she picked up her now full water glass and threw its contents directly at Serafina. That's for the champagne, she sneered. Icy water sluiced down Serafina's face, plastering her hairnet to her skin and soaking the front of her uniform. The entire restaurant was silent. Maria had her hand over her mouth. Robert looked like he was about to be sick. Marcus finally looked furious. "Kendra, that's enough. Sit down. Don't you dare tell me what to do." Kendra shrieked, her mask of sophistication completely gone. "She deserved that. She's nothing. She's a waitress." "I am a waitress," Serafina said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence like a razor. She slowly, deliberately began to unbutton her apron. The sopping wet grey fabric fell to the floor, landing in a puddle of water and champagne. "You're right," Serafina continued, her voice gaining strength. She pulled the ridiculous hairnet off, and her blonde hair, damp but free, tumbled to her shoulders. "I am a waitress. I've been a waitress here for 28 days, and in that time, I've learned more about this company than you have in the 2 years you've been sleeping with my husband." Kendra's jaw dropped. Marcus's face went from white to a dangerous mottled red. "Serafina, stop. Right now." "Stop what, Marcus? Stop telling the truth." She turned to Kendra. "You're right about this bracelet, though. It is expensive. I approved the wire transfer for it myself." Kendra blinked. What are you talking about?" "Oh, not knowingly," Serafina said with a cold laugh. "It was hidden, buried in an expense report under promotional marketing and influencer outreach, along with the lease on your condo, and your car, and that lovely Birkin bag. You're a very expensive promotional item, Kendra." She then turned her ice-blue eyes on her husband. "And you, Marcus, are a very, very stupid thief." The air in the gilded spire crackled with the kind of tension that precedes a lightning strike. The other diners were no longer pretending not to listen. They were a captive audience watching the high-stakes drama unfold. Marcus Thorne took a step forward, his face a thundercloud. He grabbed Serafina's arm, his fingers digging into her bicep. "You're making a scene," he hissed, his voice a low growl meant only for her. "You will walk out of this restaurant right now, or I will have you removed." Serafina didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. She simply looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up to his eyes. "Remove your hand, Marcus," she said, her voice devoid of all warmth. "Or I will have you removed. You seem to be forgetting whose name is on the original charter." He hesitated. That more than anything told her he knew. He knew about the 10th anniversary clause. He had just banked on her being too stupid, too passive, or too broken to ever use it. He had miscalculated. He slowly, reluctantly let go of her arm. "What is she talking about, Marcus?" Kendra demanded, her voice rising to a shrill peak. "What charter? Tell her to shut up. Tell this server to get out." "In a minute," Serafina said calmly. She looked around, her eyes landing on the back of the dining room. "But first, I believe your other guests have arrived." Marcus's head whipped around. Just as he'd planned, 2 men in expensive-looking but ill-fitting suits were being led through the door by the hostess. They looked more like Vegas high rollers than venture capitalists. Beside them, looking nervous, were 2 reporters from the Wall Street Journal and Forbes, whom Marcus had clearly invited to witness his big move. This was the real reason for the lunch. It wasn't just a date with Kendra. It was a press luncheon. He was planning to announce something. "Ah, Mr. Sloan," Marcus said, forcing a smile and striding toward the men, leaving Kendra and Serafina in a standoff. "So glad you could make it. And you as well, ladies," he said to the reporters. "Please sit. We have a lot to discuss." He gestured to the large private table he had reserved, but the reporters' eyes were glued to Serafina, who was still standing in the center of the room, her damp uniform shirt clinging to her. "Mr. Thorne," said the Forbes reporter, a sharp woman named Diane. "We seem to have walked into something. Care to comment?" "Just a domestic disagreement," Marcus said, waving a dismissive hand. "My ex-wife is unwell. Robert He barked, "Call security. Escort Miss Price out." Robert, who was still standing by the manager's podium, looked paralyzed. "Sir, He means me. Robert." Serafina called out her voice, resonating with newfound authority. "But Ms. Price is my father's name, and it's the name on 50% of this building, so I'll be staying." She walked past Marcus, past Kendra, and stood directly in front of the investors and the reporters. "Good afternoon, gentlemen, ladies. My name is Serafina Price Thorne. I am the co-owner of the Valor Hospitality Group, and I am so glad you're here. You've arrived just in time for the audit." Audit. Mr. Petrov, a man with a thick gold watch and a thicker neck, scoffed. "We are not here for audit. We are here for partnership. Mr. Thorne is announcing new vision." "Yes, he is," Serafina agreed. "A vision of fraud, a vision of embezzlement, a vision of liquidating his wife's inheritance to pay off his gambling debts and his mistress." Kendra let out a sound like a strangled cat. "Lies. She's lying." "Am I?" Serafina turned to Marcus. "Tell them, Marcus. Tell them about the new partnership. Tell them how you planned to sell a 40% stake in Valor, a stake that isn't entirely yours to sell to these two gentlemen. Tell them about their company, Global Synergy Holdings." Marcus's face was ashen. Serafina continued, "I was curious about Global Synergy Holdings, so I had my lawyers look into it. It's a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands 3 months ago. Its listed assets are, well, 0. It has no website, no employees. It's nothing. It's a front you're using to gut this company, take the cash and run. Am I wrong?" The two investors, Petrov and Sloan, exchanged a nervous glance. They hadn't expected the society wife to have a brain. "This is preposterous," Marcus blustered. "She's hysterical. Security." "They're already here, Marcus," Serafina said quietly. On cue, the front doors of the Gilded Spire opened again. This time it wasn't investors. It was 2 uniformed police officers and 2 people in sharp, sober suits, a man and a woman carrying briefcases. They were Serafina's forensic accounting team. "This," Serafina announced to the room, "is Mr. Hayes and Miss Chen from Deloitte, and these," she gestured to the officers, "are here to prevent anyone from leaving or destroying evidence." Kendra's eyes darted to the door, then back to Marcus. The panic was real now. "Marcus, do something." Marcus just stood there, his jaw working silently, the trap snapping shut around him. The Wall Street Journal reporter was already typing furiously into her phone. "You see Kendra," Serafina said, walking back toward the table, her wet shoes squeaking on the marble. "You thought I was just a waitress. You thought I was a pathetic cast-aside wife. You and Marcus both made the same critical mistake." She picked up the champagne-soaked apron from the floor and tossed it onto the table right in front of Kendra's plate. "You thought I was stupid. You forgot who my father was. You forgot who I am." To understand the steel that was now hardening in Serafina's spine, you had to understand Arthur Price. Arthur wasn't a shark. He was a craftsman. He'd started The Beacon, his first diner in Austin, with a small inheritance and a belief that good food, fair wages, and a clean ledger were the holy trinity of business. He'd personally tiled the floors. He'd created the recipe for the sky-high apple pie that had first put him on the map. Serafina had grown up in that diner. She'd done her homework in booth number 4. She'd learned to count by reconciling the cash register receipts at night with her father, his big warm hand guiding hers. "The numbers don't lie, Sarah Bean," he'd always say, his favorite nickname for her. "People do. But the numbers always tell the story." Marcus Thorne had entered their lives like a summer storm, all flash and noise. He was an ambitious MBA grad from a lesser-known school, desperate to make a mark. He'd seen Arthur's success and charmed his way into a job. He was a brilliant salesman. He could sell ice in a blizzard, and he sold himself to Arthur as the son he never had. He sold himself to Serafina, too. She, quiet, studious, and more comfortable with a balance sheet than a ballroom, was dazzled by his confidence, his easy smile, the way he seemed to adore her. Arthur, for all his folksy wisdom, had one blind spot. He wanted his daughter to be happy, and he mistook Marcus's ambition for strength. When they married, Arthur had just launched the Valor Hospitality Group, turning his single diner into a blueprint for affordable luxury restaurants. He'd made Marcus CEO, wanting to step back and enjoy his life. And for a while, it worked. Then Arthur got sick, a fast, brutal cancer. On his deathbed, his hand, frail and papery, had gripped Serafina's. The trust, he'd whispered, his voice thin. The 10-year clause, it's for you, not for him. It's a safety switch, in case the numbers start to lie. Serafina hadn't understood. The numbers don't lie. Daddy? She'd whispered back, tears streaming. No. Arthur had rasped his eyes, finding Marcus, who stood at the foot of the bed, the picture of a grieving son-in-law. But liars learn to hide them. Watch the numbers, Serabine. Always. He died that night, and Serafina, lost in her grief, let Marcus take the reins completely. She retreated, becoming the perfect, quiet Mrs. Thorne, hosting his parties, smiling at his investors, and never ever looking at the books. It was easier that way. The first crack in the facade appeared 8 months ago. She'd been looking for a tax document in Marcus's home office, a room she rarely entered, when she found a bank statement for an account she didn't recognize. A private account. In his name only. She'd seen the transfers. Small at first. $10,000 here, $20,000 there, all from a holding company she knew belonged to Valor. She'd confronted him. He'd been so smooth. Darling, that's just a bonus payout account. Standard executive practice. Don't worry your pretty head about it. He'd kissed her, told her she looked beautiful, and said he'd booked them a trip to Paris. She'd wanted to believe him, but she heard her father's voice. The numbers always tell the story. So she started to watch. Quietly. From a distance. She opened her own online brokerage account. She started reading the financial news he'd always dismissed as boring. She saw the Valor stock price dipping. She read about new expensive projects, a Miami nightclub, a disastrous hotel venture in Dubai, that were all flash and no profit. They weren't Arthur Price projects. They were Marcus Thorne projects. Then 2 months ago, she'd hired a private investigator. Not for the company. For Marcus. The photos had been clinical, devastating. Marcus and Kendra Stone, laughing, kissing, leaving a jeweler's. The date on the photo was the day he'd told her he was flying to Chicago to fix the Midwest division. The betrayal was a physical blow, but it was the second thing the PI found that truly galvanized her. Kendra wasn't just a fling. She was a vortex of spending. The PI's report came with a list of gifts, the condo, the car, the jewelry, all traced back to shell companies funded ultimately by Valor Hospitality. He wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was robbing his partner. He was destroying her father's legacy. Her 10th anniversary was 1 month away. The safety switch was about to activate. She'd met with her father's old lawyer, a man Marcus had pushed into retirement, and formulated the plan. She didn't just want to take the company. She needed to know how he was doing it from the inside. She needed undeniable public proof. So, Sarah was born. She'd dyed her hair a mousy brown, got fake glasses, and applied for the waitress job. For 28 days, she had listened. She'd heard the staff complain about corporate cutting their overtime. She'd seen the cheap cuts of meat being passed off as prime. She'd watched Robert the manager fudge inventory numbers to avoid getting screamed at by Marcus's corporate lackeys. And every night after her 12-hour shift, she'd gone not to an apartment, but to a suite at the Four Seasons under an assumed name. There she'd meet with the forensic accountants, feeding them the on-the-ground information they needed to follow the digital trail. The final piece of the puzzle had clicked into place just last night. The Global Synergy Holdings deal. It wasn't just embezzlement anymore. It was a full-scale liquidation. He was planning to sell the company's core assets to his cronies for pennies on the dollar, bankrupting Valor and walking away with millions in cash. He'd called this press lunch to announce it as a bold new partnership. He'd just never imagined his clumsy, invisible waitress would be the one to stop him. The Gilded Spire was now a courtroom. The diners were the jury. The reporters were the scribes, and Serafina was the prosecution. "Marcus," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "Before Mr. Hayes and Ms. Chen begin their presentation, and trust me, it's fascinating, complete with flow charts of your wire fraud, I'd like to correct a few statements that were made earlier." She turned her gaze to Kendra, who looked as if she'd swallowed a wasp. "First, my accounts. You were right, Kendra. Marcus did freeze our joint accounts. It was a petty, spiteful move." She paused, then gave a small, cold smile. "But he seems to have forgotten about the private trust my father established for me at birth, the one not tied to Valor, the one with a portfolio that makes his CEO salary look like a rounding error. So no, I'm not worried about my hair or my rent." Kendra's heavily made-up face seemed to pale beneath the foundation. "Second," Serafina continued, this divorce. Marcus can't divorce me and take the company, because the company was never his, not really. He was a steward, a very, very poor one. She walked to the head of the table where Marcus was supposed to have sat. She stood in the chairman's spot. When my father Arthur Price passed, he left a brilliant will. He left Marcus 50% of the company, yes, but my 50% came with a controlling interest clause, a tiebreaker, a poison pill, whatever you want to call it. It was to remain dormant as long as the company was profitable and my marriage was intact, or it would activate automatically on our 10th anniversary. She looked directly at Marcus. "Happy anniversary, darling. You should have read the fine print." Marcus finally spoke. His voice was a rasp. This is theatre. My lawyers said the clause was contestable. Undue influence." "Yes, I know," Serafina said. "I have the invoices from your lawyers. You've spent $700,000 of company money trying to find a loophole. They failed. I convened an emergency board meeting this morning at 9:00 a.m. The board, as you know, consists of myself, you, and my father's lawyer, the one you thought was a senile old man. The vote was 2-1. Effective immediately, you are removed as CEO of Valor Hospitality Group, pending a criminal investigation. You can't. I can, Serafina stated. I did. You are no longer CEO. You are as of this moment unemployed, and in quite a lot of legal trouble. The Forbes reporter Diane spoke up, her voice sharp. "Ms. Pricethorne, are you saying you're the new CEO?" Serafina looked at her. "I am the new chairwoman of the board and the controlling shareholder. I will be appointing an interim CEO, Robert." She called out, and the manager nearly jumped out of his skin. "Robert, you're the interim manager of Valor's flagship. You've been promoted. Congratulations. We'll talk salary later. A real one." Robert just blinked, speechless, As for CEO, Serafina continued, I'll be leading the search committee myself. My first act as chairwoman is to halt this fraudulent partnership with, what was it, Global Synergy Holdings. She looked at Mr. Petrov and Mr. Sloane. Gentlemen, I believe you're accessories to conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The officers are here for you as well. You might want to call your lawyers, if you even have any. Petrov and Sloane shot up from their chairs and made a dash for the door. The two police officers who had been waiting patiently stepped in front of them, blocking their exit. We'll take your statements now, sirs, one officer said, calmly. Kendra, seeing her escape route and her meal ticket cut off, finally snapped. This is insane, Marcus. She's bluffing. You're Marcus Thorne. You won't let her do this. Marcus didn't even look at her. He was staring at Serafina, his expression one of pure, unadulterated hatred. He had been so close. He'd outrun his debts. He'd found his patsies. He'd neutralized his wife. He had lost everything in a public restaurant at the hands of a woman he'd dismissed as a waitress. You, he whispered, his voice shaking with rage. You bitch! Serafina didn't even react. She simply turned to the accountants. Mr. Hayes, if you would, I believe Ms. Stone's bracelet is Exhibit A. Mr. Hayes, the lead auditor, was a man who looked like he'd been born in a grey suit. He stepped forward, opened his briefcase, and retrieved a thick, bound report. He placed it on the table with a heavy, definitive thud. Mr. Thorne. Hayes began, his voice flat and unemotional. We have been conducting a full forensic audit of Valor Hospitality Group at the request of Ms. Price Thorne for the last 28 days. The financial irregularities are extensive. The Wall Street Journal reporter was now recording with her phone, the red light a malevolent eye. We have tracked, Hayes continued, a total of $4.2 million in unauthorized, uninvoiced transfers from Valor's operating accounts to 3 offshore shell companies. Global Synergy Holdings is only the most recent. He then looked at Kendra. The other two, Keystone Holdings and Miami Bright Ventures, seem to exist for one purpose, to fund your personal lifestyle, Ms. Stone. Kendra, who had been trying to shrink into the background, was now back in the spotlight. What, that's ridiculous. I'm a brand ambassador, she protested weakly. We found no such employment contract, Ms. Chen. The other auditor interjected, stepping forward. We did find the bill of sale for a 2024 Bentley Continental, the 12-month lease on your condo at the Portofino Tower, and receipts from Cartier Van Cleef and Arpels and Hermes, all paid for by Keystone Holdings, which was in turn funded by Valor's promotional marketing budget. She produced a printout. This, for example, is the receipt for the bracelet you are currently wearing, $22 of $500. It was logged as deposit for Miami Food and Wine Festival booth. Kendra instinctively covered the bracelet with her other hand. That bracelet, Serafina said, her voice cutting in, was purchased with money that should have gone to my employees' 401k matching fund, which Marcus suspended 3 months ago, citing cash flow problems. Maria, the young waitress, gasped. The other staff members who had all gathered by the service station began to murmur angrily. They hadn't been paid their full benefits all, so this woman could wear diamonds. And now, Serafina said, her voice rising, we come to the main event, the Gilded Spire, this very restaurant. She turned to Robert, the manager. Robert, how much have your food costs gone up this quarter? Robert, still reeling from his promotion, stammered, they're up 40%, Ms. Price. Corporate said, they said our suppliers were raising rates. They lied, Serafina said. Our suppliers haven't raised their rates, but Marcus set up a new intermediary supply company, a company he owns. He's been buying produce from our farmers for, say, $1 selling it to his fake company for $3, and then selling it back to his own restaurant for $5. He's been marking up his own supplies and pocketing the difference. That's why the food is terrible, Robert. That's why your margins are gone. He's been stealing from his own kitchen. This more than anything seemed to horrify the diners. He's been poisoning the well, Serafina said, summarizing her father's worst business sin. He's been destroying the product to line his pockets. My father built this company on quality, on trust. And you, she pointed a shaking finger at Marcus, you burned it all down. For her, for your gambling debts. Debts, the Forbes reporter pounced. What debts? Oh, he didn't tell you that part. Serafina gave a hollow laugh. Mr. Thorne has a problem. A $3 million marker at a casino in Macau. A marker that was due today. This global synergy deal wasn't just greed. It was desperation. He was going to sell my father's legacy to a couple of con artists to pay off a loan shark. The room was utterly silent. Marcus Thorne, the titan of hospitality, was revealed as nothing more than a desperate common thief. Marcus, Kendra whispered, her voice trembling, finally understanding. Is that true? You're broke. The horror in her voice wasn't for his crime. It was for his bank account. Marcus didn't answer. He just stared at the report on the table. Kendra. Serafina said, her voice softened now, but with pity, not kindness. He didn't just freeze my accounts. He froze all the accounts. There's no money left. The Amex he gave you, it was declined this morning. Kendra's face crumpled. This was the final fatal blow. All the preening, the arrogance, the mockery. It was all based on a foundation of stolen money that was now officially gone. Now, Serafina said, turning to the officers, I believe you have enough. Mr. Hayes, Ms. Chen, thank you. You'll be coordinating with the district attorney's office. Officer, please escort Mr. Thorne out. The officer stepped forward. Mr. Marcus Thorne, you are under arrest for suspicion of embezzlement wire fraud and grand larceny. The officer took Marcus's arm, and for the first time Marcus resisted. He yanked his arm back, his eyes wild. You won't get away with this, Serafina, he roared, finally finding his voice. I'll fight you. I'll tell them you're insane. You'll what, Marcus? Serafina asked, unafraid. Tell them more lies. The numbers don't lie. My father taught me that. And your numbers? They tell a very, very ugly story. He lunged, not at Serafina. He lunged for the auditor's report on the table, grabbing the bound document and trying to rip it apart. It was a final, pathetic, animalistic act of desperation. The second officer moved instantly, tackling Marcus around the waist. They hit the table hard. Glasses plates and the remains of the Dom Perignon went flying. Kendra screamed as Marcus was wrestled to the floor, the click, click, click of handcuffs echoing in the grand dining room. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was brutally loud in the grand, silent dining room. It was a sound of finality, a metallic full stop on the life Marcus Thorne had built. He was on the floor, his $5,000 leather suit ripped at the shoulder, his face pressed against the cool Italian marble he had so proudly imported. The facade of the charming CEO was gone, replaced by the desperate cornered animal underneath. You can't do this, he sputtered, his voice cracking. He wasn't roaring now, he was scrambling. This is my company, I built it, Serafina. Serafina, please, tell them this is a misunderstanding. Serafina looked down at her husband, the man she had once loved, the man who had tried to discard her like trash. Her face was as cold and hard as the marble he was pinned to. You built nothing, she said, her voice cutting through his pleas. You were a parasite on my father's legacy. You didn't build this, Marcus. You just infested it. You'll be hearing from my lawyers. He tried again, shifting back to rage as the officers hauled him to his feet. I'll own you. I'll tell them you're insane. I'll own all of you. The officers practiced in this didn't flinch. They simply propelled him toward the door. Mr. Petrov and Mr. Sloan, the two shell company investors, were already being led out their faces, sullen and silent. They were professionals. They knew when the con was over. Marcus, however, was an amateur, and he went out screaming. This isn't over, Serafina. You hear me? It's not over. The grand oak doors of the gilded spire swung shut behind him, cutting off his threats. And he was gone. A heavy, profound silence descended thicker than the expensive carpets. Every eye in the room, diner reporter and staff, now turned to the last piece of the wreckage, Kendra Stone. She sat at the ruined table, a statue of spoiled ambition, her face a grotesque painting of streaked foundation and running mascara. She was trembling, her gaze fixed on the door her protector had just been dragged through. He's coming back, right? She whispered to no one. Marcus, he'll fix this. Serafina walked over to the table, her wet shoes making tiny squeaking sounds on the floor. She stood over her rival. He's not coming back, Kendra. Kendra's head snapped up, her eyes, red-rimmed and wild, finding Serafina. The panic was finally setting in. The officer, she stammered, her hand instinctively clutching her wrist. He said they're taking my bracelet. He can't. It's mine. Marcus gave it to me. He didn't give it to you, Kendra. Serafina said, her voice not cruel, just factual. He stole it for you. It was purchased with funds that should have paid for my employees' health insurance. It's not yours. It never was. That was the sentence that broke the spell. Kendra's eyes widened as the reality of her situation collapsed on her. It wasn't just the bracelet. It was the condo, the car, the Birkin bag, the entire life she had built on Marcus's lies. I have nothing, she whispered, the terror raw and naked. You have what you started with, Serafina replied, unmoved. Kendra's shock instantly curdled into a familiar, acidic hate. You bitch, she hissed. You planned this. You stood there and let me. You humiliated me. You humiliated yourself, Kendra, Serafina said, leaning in slightly. You mocked a woman you thought was beneath you. You threw champagne on a waitress. You just picked the wrong one. Serafina reached into the pocket of her drab polyester slacks. Her fingers found the small, crumpled ball of paper money. She pulled out the $20 bill damp from the water Kendra had thrown at her. She flattened it on the table right in the puddle of Dom Perignon. This, Serafina said, is for a taxi to get you wherever you go next. I'd suggest you take it and leave before the reporters decide you're their next story. I suspect you won't like the headlines you'll be in tomorrow. Kendra stared at the $20 bill as if it were a scorpion. It was the ultimate, final humiliation. It was real money. It was earned. It was everything she wasn't. With a choked sob, she snatched the bill. She grabbed her white crocodile Birkin bag, a bag Serafina knew would be repossessed by the company before sundown, and scrambled to her feet. She tried for one last glare of defiance, but it broke. She turned and fled. She didn't walk. She ran, her stilettos clattering in a desperate, unglamorous retreat, her wails echoing off the marble until the door swung shut behind her too. Serafina was left standing alone in the center of the chaos. She closed her eyes for a single long second. The adrenaline that had held her upright for an hour began to fade, and in its place, a bone-deep exhaustion settled in. She felt the dampness of her cheap shirt, the ache in her feet from a 28-day shift. She was still for this one moment. Sarah. She opened her eyes. The entire restaurant was watching her. Then from a corner table, table 4, the one who'd had the cold soup, an elderly man stood up. He was distinguished, wearing a simple but perfectly tailored tweed jacket. He raised his glass. "Young lady," he called out, his voice clear and strong. "I knew your father. Arthur Price was a fine man. A great man. He once comped my meal because my steak was 2 degrees overcooked. He said quality is the only advertising that matters. He would be achingly proud of you today." This, more than the arrests, more than the fear in Kendra's eyes, hit Serafina like a physical blow. A lump formed in her throat. She could only nod. "Thank you, sir. Thank you." The man's gesture broke the spell. A smattering of applause started, hesitant at first, then rolling through the dining room. The diners, the society wives, the businessmen, the tourists were all clapping. They were clapping for the waitress. Serafina raised a hand and the room quieted. "Thank you, all of you. My sincere apologies for the interruption." A small wry laugh escaped her. "As you can see, we're under new management, effective immediately. Your lunches, your wine, everything. It is on the house today. Please stay and enjoy it. The kitchen will be right back with you. We have a lot to celebrate." She then turned her back on the diners. Her focus was now on her people. The staff was clustered by the service station, looking at her with a mixture of awe, terror, and disbelieving hope. She walked over to them past the broken glass. Robert, the manager, looked like he was about to faint. "Robert. Miss Price," he stammered, wringing his hands. I had no idea. I hired you. I'll get my things." "Robert," she said, cutting him off gently. "You're the only one who's shown an ounce of integrity for the last 6 months. You've been trying to keep this ship afloat while the captain was drilling holes in the hull. You're not fired. You're promoted. I'm making you interim COO of the entire Valor Restaurant division. Not just this location, all of them." Robert's mouth opened and closed. "Cool, but I'm a restaurant manager." "And I'm a waitress," Serafina smiled. "We'll learn together. My father's old office is at corporate. I want you there Monday, 8 a.m. We are rebuilding this company from the studs, and we're starting with your salary. It's being tripled." Robert's eyes filled with tears. He couldn't speak. He just nodded, a look of profound, life-changing gratitude on his face. She then turned to Maria, who was hiding behind Robert, crying silently. "Maria." The young woman wiped her eyes. "Yes, Ms. Price." "First," Serafina announced loud enough for all the staff to hear, "as of this second, the 401k match is restored. All suspended overtime is to be paid out on the next check retroactively. And, for what everyone had to witness today, everyone on shift gets a $1,000 bonus. Call it combat pay." A wave of gasps and a few muffled cheers came from the kitchen. Maria just stared. $1,000. "And you, Maria," Serafina continued, "what are you in night school for?" Hospitality management, ma'am," Maria whispered. Serafina smiled. A real warm smile, the first one that day. "Good. The Valor Group is officially restarting my father's old tuition reimbursement program. Your next semester is paid for, and I'm promoting you to assistant manager effective now. You'll report to Robert." Maria let out a sob, and, shattering all protocol, threw her arms around Serafina. Surprised, Serafina hugged her back tightly. It was a real human connection, the first one she'd felt in what seemed like a lifetime. She gently disengaged and finally turned to the last group, the reporters. Diane, the Forbes reporter, had her phone down. Her expression was one of pure, unadulterated respect. "Miss Pricethorne, that was the story of the year," she said. "You came here for a partnership announcement. You got one?" "I did," Serafina said, brushing a damp strand of blonde hair from her face. "You can report that Valor Hospitality Group is not and will not be for sale. It is entering a new partnership with its own employees and with its original principles. We are going back to basics, back to what my father believed in: quality, integrity, and service." "But why Ms. Price?" the Wall Street Journal reporter asked. "Why this? The uniform, the 28 days of this. You had the lawyers. You had the auditors. You could have done this in a boardroom." Serafina looked down at her hands, red and chapped from the hot water and sanitizer. "In a boardroom," she said, "I would have been fighting over numbers on a page. I would have been Mrs. Thorne, the grieving widow, the quiet society wife. They would have dismissed me. My husband dismissed me. To win, I had to know what I was really fighting for. It wasn't just stock prices, it was this." She gestured around the room. "It's the feel of the floor at the end of a double. It's the kitchen staff's stress when the printer jams. It's Robert's panic over food costs. It's Maria's hope for a better life. My father built this company from the ground up, and Marcus was rotting it from the top down. The only way to save it was from the ground up." She looked directly at Diane. "For the last month I've been Sarah, the invisible woman, and I learned that the people you think are invisible, they are the ones who see everything. They know the truth. My husband, he thought I didn't matter. He thought none of this mattered. That was his fatal mistake. As of today, everyone at Valor matters." She gave them a small, tired but powerful smile. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm still on the clock, and I need to change." She turned her back on the reporters on the diners and walked toward the staff-only door. She didn't look back. She pushed it open and disappeared into the heart of the house, leaving the world to digest the story of the waitress who had just become the queen. And just like that, Serafina went from waitress to boss. The Gilded Spire wasn't just a restaurant, it was her kingdom, and she'd just cleaned house. Marcus and Kendra found out that day that true power isn't about the watch on your wrist or the woman on your arm, it's about the name on the deed. They thought they were looking at a victim, but they were staring down a queen. What did you think of Serafina's ultimate comeback? Do you think Marcus and Kendra got what they deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you love stories of justice and empowerment, where the underestimated finally get their revenge, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life drama every week. Don't miss what happens next.
Thanks for watching.